Hey everybody, it's Brother Chaplain Kage here with my first video on smoothing green stuff. First I want to talk about some of the tools that I use. This guy right here I'd probably do 90% of my sculpting with. It's a size 2 chisel point clay shaper. You can see he's getting a little worn with age, but this is my workhorse. I use this for almost everything. Next up, size 2 taper point. I use this almost exclusively for doing folds in cloth. We also get some use getting the green stuff into small areas so the chisel point can't. If you also need to make little round indentions or impressions, something like that, is good for that too. Next up I have basically the same two tools, just in a size 0. And these I use for pretty much the same things, but just in areas that the larger size 2s can't get into. And then we have the only dental tool I ever kept out of any of those big packs, 20 or so, that I'm sure most of us have purchased at some point or another. I took some files and a Dremel and really filed down the edge to make it nice and sharp so I could do some really thin, well-defined impressions that the chisel point can't. And you might see some of this later on when I do another video on making bags and stuff. Now the back end, the spoon end, this is what I tried to do smoothing with in the old days. Wasn't very successful, just using water. And the clay shapers are so much better for it, I don't even use this guy anymore. All right, next I want to talk about lubricating your sculpting tools. This little container I keep on my desk, and it's just some canola oil from the kitchen. I'll dip the tip of the shaper into it, put a little bit on the back of my hand so I'm not constantly going back to the container when I need more. You can see right here, I've got a little bit too much on there, so I'm going to wipe some of that excess off. You really don't need a whole lot on there. And in fact, if you put too much oil on there, it can start to affect the green stuff, and it'll make smoothing and rejoining parts even more difficult. All right, now I want to give a little demonstration of how the tools stick to the green stuff, and I've mixed some up, let it sit for a few minutes, get nice and tacky. You can see how much it's sticking to my fingers here. And let's get this fixed onto this piece of sheet plastic, and we'll show you why you absolutely need lubrication for your tools when working with this horrible, horrible green stuff. Now, this is what I used to use, the old spoon on the metal dental tool, and see how much that's sticking to it. Like, even trying to pull it across the surface and smooth it out, it's sticking so bad, it's not going to do anything. And smaller surface area, still no difference. The blade edge just sticks to it like crazy. Now I'll show you the taper point will still be grabbed by the green stuff. I've heard people online talk about how that the clay shapers are immune to it, and not as bad as a metal tool, but it's still too much to let you do any smoothing or sculpting. So now I'll get my chisel point, add some oil to it, and we'll do a little green stuff smoothing here. And one of the biggest problems I see and that people ask me about most often is getting rid of fingerprints. So we'll get this good and covered in fingerprints. And this will also work for tool impressions if you're pressing into the putty too hard and you leave marks behind. But the long story short here is you just use the flat edge of the chisel and very lightly drag it over the surface. That's it. That's the big secret of smoothing out your green stuff. Now it's going to take some practice because you have to use very light pressure, so it only moves the very top of the putty. And learning to do that will take some time. Another way to look at it is like the construction guys doing concrete work and using a trowel to glide over the surface and smooth it out. Kind of the same thing. Take your time here, and you have plenty of time before the green stuff cures too much. Don't worry about that. But if you rush or push too hard with a shaper, you'll leave impressions, or worse, you'll deform the shape. And just keep working that. Very slow, very gentle strokes. You see how it's gradually getting smoother. Now I'll just put fingerprints all over this again and show it another time. Now, back in the old days, I would have gotten really upset if I accidentally put a finger into some work I'd already done and covered in fingerprints. And back when I was still trying to use water with the metal sculpting tools, it was a nightmare. And what I'm doing here is I'm building up a flat side, like maybe an armor panel or something, and show you how using too much pressure can deform the shape you're trying to sculpt and also put tool marks into the putty. As soon as this gets back into focus, there we go. Okay. So now if you press down too hard, you can see here how the edges of the shaper are putting these big creases into the green stuff and also deforming that shape. Now, these tool marks can be a little bit harder to remove than fingerprints, but it's not impossible. Now, what you want to do here is you want to channel your inner Bob Ross. Least little touch of the shaper, least little touch, 3 hairs and some air. Let me change the angle here so you can see the that crease and the reflection from the light bulb there. Get a nice clear image of just how smooth that's getting. See how that's just disappearing? Just vanishing? Bam. Like magic. And it's gone. And that's it. That's really the big secret to smoothing out the green stuff.